My mom called me the backup daughter my entire life. At my engagement dinner, she said my sister deserved my fiancé more. As far back as I can remember, my older sister Vanessa has been the golden child. She was prettier, smarter, more talented, and my mother made sure I felt it every single day growing up. When I got A B on a test, my mom asked why I couldn't be more like Vanessa with her straight A's. When I joined the soccer team, my mom said it was cute that I was trying. You know that gut-wrenching feeling when you realize the people who are supposed to love you most have been secretly plotting against you, trying to sabotage your happiness? Well, imagine experiencing that betrayal not from a stranger, but from your own mother and sister at your engagement dinner. I'm talking about a moment so shocking, so utterly dehumanizing, it rewrites your entire past and forces you to confront a truth you'd spent a lifetime trying to ignore. My whole life, I was the backup daughter. My sister, Vanessa, was the star, a state champion in volleyball, Ivy League bound, while I was just there. When I got into a good college, my mom would shrug. It's nice, but it's not Ivy League like Vanessa's. 26 years of being told, subtly and not so subtly, that I wasn't good enough, that I existed only in Vanessa's shadow. So, at 18, I packed my bags and built my own life, my own career. Years later, I met Luis. And honestly, he's everything I ever dreamed of. Kind, supportive. He loves me, exactly as I am. 6 months ago, he proposed, and I said yes without a second thought. We decided on a small engagement dinner with both our families to celebrate. I was terrified of my mom being there, but Luis, sweet Luis, convinced me it could be a fresh start, a chance to heal. The dinner started off surprisingly well. My mom was on her best behavior, even complimented my dress, which, honestly, sent a shockwave through me. Then Vanessa strolled in, late, of course. She was wearing this pristine white dress, totally over the top for the occasion, and immediately launched into a monologue about her latest promotion. My mom's eyes, they just lit up, the way they always did for Vanessa. For the next 30 minutes, the entire conversation revolved around my sister's achievements. I tried to steer it back to Luis and me, to our engagement, but my mom kept pulling it back to Vanessa. Then she stood up. She said she wanted to make a toast. My heart actually fluttered for a second. This is it, I thought. She's finally going to say something nice about me. She raised her glass, praised Luis, called him a wonderful man. Then she looked at Vanessa, and my blood ran cold. She said, "It's such a shame he met the wrong sister first." She actually laughed like it was a joke, but she kept going. "Vanessa," she insisted, "would have been a much better match for someone like Luis. She's more beautiful, more successful. Honestly, more deserving of a man like him." She even looked at Luis and said she hoped he knew what he was getting into, but it wasn't too late to upgrade. The table went dead silent. Luis's parents looked absolutely horrified. Luis himself looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. And Vanessa? She just sat there, smiling, like she agreed with every single word. A wave of heat rushed through me, burning my cheeks, and my hands started shaking uncontrollably. 26 years of not good enough came crashing down all at once. My chair scraped back as I pushed myself to my feet. "I have something to say, too, Mom," I managed, my voice shaking but firm. "I told her 2 months ago I was helping her set up her new phone, and I saw her messages with Vanessa. Every single text. I saw them trash-talking me behind my back. My mother called me an embarrassment. Vanessa said I was punching above my weight with Luis, and my mother agreed. She wrote, 'I don't understand what he sees in her.' And then the sickening climax, I saw their plan. Their plan for Vanessa to flirt with Luis tonight at our engagement dinner, to see if his head could be turned. Their faces drained of color. My mom stammered, 'You're taking things out of context.' Vanessa scoffed, 'You're being dramatic.' That's when Luis, bless his heart, stood up. He didn't yell. He just looked at them, his eyes blazing, and told them both to leave. My mom started crying. saying I was ruining the family. "No," I said, my voice rock solid, "you ruined it. 26 years ago, when you decided I would never be good enough." They finally left. Luis's mom, a true angel, came over and hugged me tight, whispering that I'd handled it with more grace than they deserved. But that wasn't the end. Oh no. What my mother didn't know then, what Vanessa didn't know, was that I'd screenshotted every single one of those messages, every cruel word, every manipulative plot, and I had them queued up, ready to drop in the family group chat, the one with all our aunts, uncles, cousins, and grandparents. I sat in my car in the restaurant parking lot for 20 minutes, my finger hovering over the send button. The screenshots were right there. Once I hit send, there was no taking it back. My hands were still trembling from the confrontation, but I felt clearer than I had in years. The steering wheel was cold under my palms, my breath fogging up the windshield. I reread the texts one last time. Embarrassment, punching above her weight, the plan to break us up. I took a deep breath, and I pressed send. The message delivered to 43 family members. The read receipt started popping up almost instantly. 1-3-7-15. My phone began buzzing like crazy, a constant stream of notifications. Someone was calling, then someone else. I silenced my phone and dropped it into the cup holder. Luis found me there, got into the passenger seat without a word, gently took my phone and turned it off. Then he just held my hand while I finally let myself cry. His parents followed us home, making sure we got there safely. His mom, in her quiet, comforting way, made tea while I sat on the couch, numb, trying to process what I'd just done. She didn't ask questions. She just sat next to me, rubbing my back in small, soothing circles. Luis and his dad talked quietly in the kitchen, their low voices a comforting rumble. Luis's mom even stayed over in our guest room. The next morning, I turned my phone back on. 217 notifications. My stomach dropped. Luis's mom was already awake. She sat with me on the couch, reading glasses perched on her nose, helping me sort through the chaos. She identified who was supportive, who was attacking me. My Uncle Dominic sent a long message, admitting he'd always suspected my mother treated me differently but never realized how truly awful it was. He apologized for not speaking up sooner. My Aunt Fern called, and we talked for an hour. She shared her own experiences with my mother's cruelty when they were younger, revealing my mom always needed a target to feel superior. Before I existed, it was Fern. She described family dinners where my mother would tear her apart, criticizing her cooking, her clothes, her husband. Fern's voice cracked as she apologized for not protecting me, for making excuses for my mother for so long. She wished she'd been braver. 3 cousins from my father's side even created a separate group chat, excluding my mother, Vanessa, and my grandmother. They shared their own stories, comments my mother had made about me at family gatherings I never attended. One cousin said my mother had told her I was lucky to have a job at all, given my limited abilities. Another revealed my mother complained I embarrassed the family by not being as accomplished as Vanessa. Her cruelty, it turned out, was even more extensive than I ever imagined. My mother, meanwhile, sent a flurry of texts, swinging wildly between rage and guilt-tripping. She called me ungrateful, said I'd humiliated her, demanded I delete the messages and apologize. When I didn't respond, she threatened to show up at my apartment. Luis, without hesitation, changed our door code and alerted building security. I overheard him giving them her physical description. That's the kind of man he is. Vanessa tried a different tactic, texting Luis directly. She apologized for the misunderstanding, asking to talk privately to clear the air. Luis just screenshotted her message, showed it to me, and then blocked her number. Didn't even respond. 3 days after the dinner, my father finally called. He sounded utterly exhausted. He said my mother had been hysterical, but he admitted what she'd said at the dinner was wrong. He asked if I'd consider family therapy. I'm not interested in fixing something my mother doesn't think is broken, I told him. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said he understood and hung up. Luis's best friend, Grant, came over with takeout. He told me half his family was following the drama now because Luis's parents had told them what happened. Grant shared that his own mom had dealt with a toxic sister, and cutting contact was the best decision she ever made. That validation from people outside my immediate family, it helped me feel less crazy. Grant stayed for dinner, telling stories about his mother's journey to set boundaries, and he made me laugh for the first time in days. Then, 3 days after Grant left, a text came from Regina. She asked if we could meet for coffee. I hadn't seen her in years. My mother always found ways to keep us apart. Regina lived 2 hours away, but said she'd drive to me. We met at a small cafe. She looked older, but her smile was just as warm. She told me she saw everything in the group chat and had to reach out. She'd been watching my mother treat me badly since I was a kid, she said, and had stopped coming to family events 5 years ago because she couldn't stand it anymore. Her voice got quiet as she apologized for not speaking up sooner. She told me about a Christmas dinner when I was 12, where my mother spent an hour praising Vanessa's awards and didn't mention me once, even though I was right there. Regina went home and cried that night, she said, because she was so angry on my behalf. She reached across the table, squeezed my hand, and told me I was brave for finally standing up, that she was proud of me. For 2 hours, we talked, sharing stories about complicated mothers and the power of boundaries. When we left, she made me promise to stay in touch, to be part of my life now that my mother wasn't controlling who I could see. The drive home felt lighter, knowing I had her support. That evening, while Luis and I were having dinner, the family group chat exploded. My phone buzzed so much I had to flip it face down. Luis picked it up, read the notifications, his face tightening. My grandmother had posted a long message, defending my mother, saying I was too sensitive, making a big deal out of nothing, tearing the family apart over a misunderstanding. The replies came in fast. Uncle Dominic corrected her. It wasn't a misunderstanding. I saw the screenshots. Aunt Fern posted that she was tired of making excuses for my mother's cruelty. A distant cousin I barely knew jumped in, urging me to forgive, because family is everything. Another cousin shot back. Family doesn't give you permission to be cruel. The thread spiraled, people taking sides, bringing up old grudges and arguments totally unrelated to me. It became a mess of anger and blame. Luis finally took my phone, turned off the notifications. You don't need to read any more of this tonight, he said. I felt sick knowing my grandmother, after seeing everything, was still defending my mother. Luis ordered takeout and we watched a movie, trying to distract ourselves, but my mind kept replaying the messages. 4 days later, a thick letter arrived in my mailbox. My mother's. Handwriting. My stomach dropped. I took it inside, sat on the couch, and opened it. 6 pages, front and back, covered in her neat cursive. She started by saying she was heartbroken I wouldn't answer her calls. The toast at the dinner? Just a joke, she claimed. You took it the wrong way. She insisted she'd always loved both her daughters equally, that I was remembering my childhood wrong. She was hard on me, she wrote, because I wanted you to reach your full potential. She listed times she helped me with homework, drove me to soccer practice, as if those few moments could erase decades of emotional abuse. Vanessa was devastated, she said, and I was destroying our family, being selfish and cruel by refusing to forgive her. The letter went on, the same manipulation, dressed in different words. Not once did she apologize for what she said. Not once did she admit her words at dinner were wrong. Instead, she blamed me for being too sensitive, for holding grudges. The last page stated she was willing to forgive me if I apologized to her and Vanessa publicly in the group chat. She signed it with "Love, Mom," as if nothing she wrote was hurtful. I read it twice. My hand started shaking again. The anger built in my chest, a burning inferno. I had to move. I grabbed my keys. I need to walk, I told Luis. He offered to come, but I needed to be alone. I walked around the block 3 times in the cold air, trying to calm down. She still didn't understand. She still thought she was the victim. The letter, meant to fix things, had only made everything worse. That night, Luis found me on the couch, staring at my phone. He sat next to me. "Want to get away for the weekend?" he asked. "Somewhere quiet. No phones." I agreed immediately. The constant notifications, the family drama, it was exhausting. The next morning, we packed bags and drove 3 hours to a bed and breakfast in the mountains. Small, cozy hiking trails nearby. The first day, we walked through the woods, not talking about my family. Luis pointed out birds, interesting trees. We sat by a stream, listening to the water. On the second day, we hiked to a lookout point. The entire valley spread out below us. We ate sandwiches, watched clouds drift across the sky. My phone stayed in my bag the entire time, and without the constant buzzing, the messages, I could finally think. I realized how much energy I had spent my entire life trying to make my mother proud. Every decision filtered through what she would think. Every accomplishment felt hollow because I knew she'd compare it to Vanessa. Even my career choices were influenced by this desperate craving for her approval. Sitting on that mountain, looking at the view, it hit me. I would never get what I wanted from her. She would never see me the way I needed her to. That thought, it should have hurt. Instead, it felt like relief. I didn't have to try anymore. Luis took my hand, and we sat there until the sun began to set. On the drive home, I felt different. Lighter somehow. The distance had helped me see that my mother's opinion didn't define my worth. Back at the apartment, I turned my phone on. 53 new messages. Most from the family group chat, but several from my Uncle Cash's. He'd been trying to organize a family meeting with a professional mediator, sending me details about a therapist specializing in family conflict. He meant well, but the idea just made me tired. I called him back, thanked him, but told him I wasn't interested in sitting in a room with my mother and Vanessa. He sounded disappointed. He said he understood that families were complicated, but he hated seeing everyone torn apart. I explained that I wasn't the one who tore things apart. My mother did that years ago. I was just finally responding to it. He was quiet for a minute. Then he said, "I get it." He told me the invitation stood if I changed my mind, and he'd always be there if I needed him. I appreciated his effort, but I knew a mediator wouldn't fix this. My mother would just use it as another chance to play the victim. Cassius ended the call, telling me to take care of myself. I promised I would. An Instagram message popped up from an account I didn't recognize. Blank profile picture. Random letters for username. I almost deleted it, but something made me open it. Heard about everything through mutual friends. Want to reconnect. It was from Vivian, my best friend from high school. We'd lost touch after graduation. Seeing her name brought back a flood of memories. Sleepovers, late-night talks. I messaged her back and we made plans for lunch. We met at a restaurant halfway between our apartments. She stood up and hugged me immediately. She looked different, but her laugh was exactly the same. We caught up on 8 years of life. Then she brought up my mother. She said she'd always thought my mother was cruel, even when we were teenagers. She remembered coming over, watching my mother praise Vanessa while ignoring me. She even recounted a time I got second place in a school competition, and my mother said, "It's a shame you couldn't be first, like Vanessa." Vivian wanted to say something back then, she admitted, but didn't know how. She was just a kid herself, and my mother scared her. She apologized for not being braver. "There was nothing you could have done," I told her. We talked for 3 hours, exchanging numbers, promising to stay in touch. Having her back felt like finding a piece of myself I'd forgotten existed. 2 days after lunch with Vivian, another Instagram account started messaging me. This one claimed Vanessa was the real victim. It said I'd turned the whole family against her, that she never wanted to hurt me, that she was just following our mother's lead and didn't know how else to act. I read through them, searching for any genuine apology, any acknowledgement of what she'd done. Nothing. Just excuses, blame shifting. The account claimed she was in therapy, working on herself, hoping we could rebuild our relationship. But the tone was all wrong. It sounded like she was reading from a script, trying to say what she thought I wanted to hear. No genuine understanding of the harm she caused. I screenshotted every message, adding them to a folder on my phone where I kept evidence of their behavior. Then I blocked the account. Within an hour, a different account messaged me with the same profile picture. I blocked that one too. Vanessa was relentless, but I was done engaging with her manipulation. Luis's parents invited us over for dinner that Saturday. His mother made pot roast. His father set the table with their nice dishes. After we ate, Luis's mom asked to talk to me privately. We went into the living room, and she sat next to me, taking my hand. "No matter what happens with your own family," she said, her eyes getting watery, "I consider you part of ours." She told me she'd already started thinking of me as her daughter, that she was so proud of how I'd handled everything, how watching me set boundaries had been inspiring. She understood how hard this was, she said, because her own mother had been difficult. "You will always have a place in our family," she promised. That acceptance, it made my throat tight. I started crying, and she hugged me. This is what a mother's love is supposed to feel like, I thought. Support without conditions, pride without comparison, love without cruelty. Luis and his father came back in, saw us crying, and his dad made a joke about women and emotions, but his voice was kind. They all hugged me before we left. The drive home was quiet but peaceful. I had a family now, just not the one I was born into. The next Monday, security called me at work during my lunch break. My mother was in the lobby, asking to see me. My heart started racing. I went down to find her sitting there, crying, making a scene. Other people were staring. She saw me, stood up, and started talking loudly about how I wouldn't return her calls, how I was breaking her heart. She reached for me, but I stepped back. "You need to leave," I told her, my voice calm but firm. She said we needed to talk, that I was being unreasonable. "You need to leave," I repeated, "or I'll have security escort you out." She looked shocked, like she couldn't believe I was serious. The security guard stepped forward. My mother's face changed. The crying stopped. Her expression went cold. "You're going to regret this," she hissed. "You're breaking my heart, and you'll understand when you have children of your own." Then she turned and walked towards the door. Before she left, she shouted across the lobby, "You're an ungrateful daughter!" Everyone heard her. My face burned with embarrassment. The security guard apologized, asked if I was okay. I nodded, went back upstairs, my hand shaking the rest of the afternoon. She had crossed another line. I knew this wouldn't be the last time. The next morning, I called a therapist. Dr. Miller, specializing in family problems and toxic relationships. Her office had an opening that afternoon. The waiting room was calm, soft music, comfortable chairs. Dr. Miller, with her dark hair and kind eyes, led me to her office. I started with the engagement dinner, then went back, explaining my entire childhood. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "Your mother's behavior," she said, "fits something called narcissistic favoritism." She explained that some parents need a golden child and a scapegoat to feel in control. "Nothing you did caused it," she said, "and nothing you could have done would have fixed it." That validation from a professional made something inside me relax. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't too sensitive. My mother's treatment of me was real, and it was wrong. Dr. Miller asked about the boundaries I'd set, blocking calls, refusing family events. She said they were healthy and appropriate. She warned me my mother would likely escalate before she accepted them. "People like your mother don't handle a loss of control well," she explained. We scheduled weekly appointments. I left her office feeling less guilty. A professional who studies this stuff said I was doing the right thing. That mattered more than I expected. 3 days after my session, Fern called. "Luis and I are having dinner on Saturday," she said. "Just us, Dominic, and the kids. No drama, no tension, just family." I agreed before I could overthink it. Saturday arrived, and Luis drove us to their house. My hands shook a little pulling into the driveway. It was the first family gathering since the dinner. Old habits made me nervous. Dominic hugged us both at the door. Their kids, teenagers now, waved from the living room. The house smelled like roasted chicken and garlic. Fern came out, wiped her hands on a towel, and pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than expected. "So glad you came," she whispered. Dinner was normal, in a way I'd never experienced with my family. We talked about work, school, the kids' sports. Nobody brought up my mother or Vanessa. Nobody made comparisons or backhanded comments. When dessert came out, Fern stood up, glass in hand. "I want to make a proper toast to your engagement," she said, "the one you should have gotten at the restaurant." She looked at Luis. "You're lucky to have her." Then at me. "You deserve someone who sees your worth." My throat tightened. I blinked fast to keep from crying. This is what family is supposed to feel like. Over the next week, more relatives reached out. My second cousin, Michelle, sent a long message about her own mother always favoring her brother. We met for coffee, talked for 2 hours. She understood the weird guilt that comes with cutting off a parent, even a hurtful one. She'd gone through it herself 5 years ago, and her life got better once she stopped trying to fix the relationship. My uncle from my father's side sent a text saying he supported me. 2 more cousins commented on old photos on social media with heart emojis. I was building a network of family members who actually saw me as a person, not as the backup daughter. It felt like starting over, but in a good way. Relatives who treated me with basic respect. The bar was so low before, this felt amazing. My phone rang while I was making breakfast. My grandmother's number. Curiosity won out, and I answered. She launched into a monologue about my mother's health, claiming she was so stressed she'd had chest pains, that it was all my fault for refusing to forgive. Her voice shook, trying to guilt-trip me. I took a breath. "Mom's health is not my responsibility," I said, my voice calm. "Using health scares to manipulate me won't work anymore." My grandmother gasped. "You're being cruel. Family is supposed to forgive." "Family," I countered, "is also supposed to treat each other with basic respect." She started crying, saying she didn't understand how I'd become so cold. "I learned boundaries from a therapist," I told her, "not coldness." I hung up before she could say anything else. My hand shook, but I felt proud of myself for not backing down. Luis and I sat at our kitchen table, wedding magazines spread out. His parents had offered to pay, which made me cry when they first suggested it. We started our guest list. Luis wrote down his family and our friends. I wrote down Fern, Dominic, Regina, my father, and a few other supportive relatives. My mother's name? Not on the list. Vanessa's? Nope. Luis asked if I was sure. I nodded. He squeezed my hand. "Okay," he said. We counted the names. A small wedding, maybe 40 people. He asked if that bothered me. "It feels right," I told him. "These are the people who actually care about us." Making these choices felt powerful, not sad. I wasn't inviting people out of obligation or fear. I was choosing who got to celebrate with us. And that choice was mine. An email notification popped up while I was at work. Vanessa's work address. "I'm sorry" was the subject line. I opened it, even though I probably shouldn't have. 3 paragraphs. She was in therapy, she claimed. She realized now our mother's favoritism damaged her. 2, by making her dependent on being the best. She never learned real relationships because she was too busy performing for our mother's approval. Could we rebuild? Did I want to be real sisters? I read it twice. The whole email focused on her pain, her therapy, her realizations. She never apologized for smiling at the dinner. She never acknowledged planning to flirt with Luis. The email was about her victimhood, not my hurt. I closed it without responding. She didn't get closure from me just because she decided she wanted it. Dr. Miller and I spent our next session working on a letter to my mother, a boundary letter. Several drafts, making sure it was just right. It stated I would not have contact with my mother until she acknowledged the specific harm she caused throughout my life. It listed examples, not cruelly but factually. It said I needed her to stop blaming me for the consequences of her own actions, and that I wasn't asking for an apology that shifted blame or made excuses. 1 page, single-spaced. Dr. Miller read it, nodded. Clear and firm without being mean. We printed it, I signed it, and I sent it certified mail. No way she could claim she never got it. Insurance, the woman at the post office asked. I almost laughed. No amount of insurance could protect what was in that envelope. My mother's response came 3 days later, but not in a letter. She posted on Facebook. A devoted mother being punished for loving both her daughters equally. Some children don't appreciate the sacrifices parents make. Heartbroken. Doesn't understand where she went wrong. 20 likes, a dozen comments from people who didn't know the full story. Several family members who weren't in the original group chat messaged me, asking what was going on. I sent them the screenshots and a copy of the boundary letter. 3 relatives responded within an hour. No idea it was this bad. Done making excuses for her. My mother's Facebook post stayed up for 6 hours before she deleted it. I screenshotted it first, just in case. Come home early on Friday, Luis told me. He wouldn't say why. I left at 4:30, a knot of nerves in my stomach. When I walked in, he was wearing a nice shirt, a weird smile. Change into something comfortable, we're leaving. Where are we going? Surprise. 20 minutes later, we pulled up to his parents' house. The driveway was full of cars I recognized. Luis led me to the backyard. String lights hung between the trees, a table laden with food and drinks. Fern and Dominic were there with their kids. Regina, Grant, and his girlfriend. Even my father, looking a little uncomfortable but present. Luis's parents came over, his mom hugging me. Luis wanted to throw you a proper engagement party, she said, with people who actually love you. Everyone raised their glasses. Luis's father toasted to new beginnings. Then Fern stood up, gave a speech about how proud she was of the woman I'd become despite everything. Watching you set boundaries and choose yourself, she said, has been inspiring. People clapped. I started crying. This was the first celebration in my entire life where I was the center of positive attention, without conditions or comparisons. Monday morning, my boss called me into her office. I braced myself for trouble. Instead, she promoted me to senior analyst with a raise and my own office. Earned it, she said. I somehow made it back to my desk without floating away. The first people I called were Luis and his parents. Luis screamed into the phone, "We're celebrating tonight." His mom cried happy tears, so proud. I was sitting at my desk, phone still in hand, when it hit me. I hadn't thought about calling my mother. The impulse, the need to share good news with her, just wasn't there anymore. I waited for the sadness to come, but it didn't. Instead, I felt lighter. I was building a life where her opinion didn't matter, and that realization didn't hurt the way I thought it would. Regina texted, asking to meet for coffee. Vanessa had reached out to her, asking if Regina would mediate a conversation between us. Regina said she told Vanessa she'd ask me, but wouldn't pressure me. "What do you want to do?" she asked. "I'm not ready," I told her. "And I might never be." Regina nodded. Completely valid choice. She promised to tell Vanessa no, without making me the bad guy. I thanked her for respecting my decision instead of trying to convince me about family. "Some family relationships aren't worth saving," Regina said, squeezing my hand, "and that's okay." 2 weeks later, my father texted. Could we meet for coffee? My mother didn't know, he said. He wanted to talk alone. We met at a place across town. He was already there at a corner table, looking older, with new lines around his eyes. His shoulders slumped. We hugged awkwardly. He asked how I was. Fine, I said, mostly true. He stirred his coffee for a long time. Then he looked up. I'm sorry, he said, for not protecting you better, for standing by. He admitted living with my mother's anger had been exhausting, that he couldn't pretend anymore that everything she did was normal. He looked tired, like admitting this out loud had drained him. I didn't know what to say. I'd waited my whole life to hear him acknowledge it, but now it felt numb. The apology didn't fix anything. It didn't give me back my childhood, or erase the years of comparisons, but it was more accountability than I expected. I appreciate you saying that, I told him. We talked for another hour, about small things, avoiding the real conversation. When we were about to leave, I told him I was willing to have a relationship with him if he could respect my boundaries. No discussing my mother, no trying to reconcile us. He agreed immediately, almost desperately, like he'd been waiting for permission to have a relationship with me that didn't involve her. We decided to meet once a month for coffee. It wasn't a close relationship, but it was more honest. I drove home feeling strange, like I'd just made peace with something I didn't know I needed to. The next morning, a text from my grandmother. Long, formal. You're no longer welcome at family holidays, she wrote. Ashamed of you for treating your mother this way. A daughter who would humiliate her mother in public and refuse to apologize is no granddaughter of hers. She listed all the upcoming holidays I was banned from. I read it twice, waiting for the hurt. But instead, relief washed over me. I was being excluded from events that always made me miserable anyway. Thanksgiving dinners, where my mother commented on my weight while praising Vanessa's thinness. Christmas mornings, where my gifts were practical socks, while Vanessa got jewelry. Easter brunches, where my grandmother asked why I wasn't married yet. Now, I had an excuse to skip all of it guilt-free. I screenshotted it, sent it to Luis. I guess we're having our own holidays now. He responded immediately. My parents already invited us to everything. We're going to start our own traditions. I deleted my grandmother's message without responding, and made myself breakfast, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Luis and I spent the next Saturday looking at wedding venues. We'd seen 3 that were fine but didn't feel right. Then we pulled up to a small garden tucked behind a historic building. I fell in love immediately. Stone pathways, flower beds, an arbor covered in climbing roses. A small patio for 50 people, string lights. Intimate, beautiful. Nothing like the big, fancy venues my mother would have wanted. Luis squeezed my hand. He felt it too. We booked it for 6 months out. The owner congratulated us. Driving home, we talked about the guest list. Only invite people who genuinely celebrate our relationship, Luis suggested. No obligation invites. No uncomfortable family members. Just the people who've shown up for us. Planning the wedding started to feel joyful. We made lists on napkins. My father's name went on. Aunt Fern and Uncle Dominic. Regina and Vivian. Luis's whole family. 42 names. Every single one. Someone who made me happy. The following Tuesday, I saw one of my mother's friends in the produce section. She spotted me before I could escape. She asked how I was, in that fake concerned voice people use when they're fishing for gossip. I'm great, I said, trying to move past her. She stepped in front of my cart. Heard about the engagement dinner. Your mother's heartbroken. Such a shame when children don't appreciate everything their parents do. She looked at me, expecting an apology. Instead, I looked her right in the eye. My mother broke my heart for 26 years, I told her. One uncomfortable dinner doesn't compare. If you're so concerned about my mother's feelings, maybe you should ask her why she thought it was okay to tell me my sister deserved my fiancé more. The woman's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I pushed my cart past her. My hands shook a little, but it was from adrenaline, not shame. I was learning to defend myself without feeling guilty. In my next therapy session, I told Dr. Miller about the grocery store and my father reaching out. She listened, then asked, "How do you feel about the idea of losing your mother permanently?" I don't know, I admitted. I'm not sure I ever really had the mother I needed. She nodded. You're mourning the relationship you needed, she explained, not the one that actually existed. It was normal, she said, to grieve the parent I wished I had, while also accepting the real relationship was harmful. This distinction, it made something click in my brain. I'd been waiting my whole life for my mother to become the parent I deserved. But that was never going to happen. The mother I needed didn't exist. What I was losing was the hope she might change. And that hope was keeping me stuck. Dr. Miller asked what it would look like to stop waiting for her to become someone different. I thought about it. It would look like the life I was building now. A life where her opinion didn't define my worth. I left her office feeling like I'd just put down something heavy I didn't realize I was carrying. Vivian called that weekend, inviting me to a dinner party at her apartment. You'd like my friends, she said. I was nervous about meeting new people, worried they might have heard about the family drama. But when I got there were 6 other women, all around our age. Vivian introduced me, and nobody asked about my family. Nobody brought up anything uncomfortable. We ate, talked about work, shows, travel. One woman told a funny story about her terrible boss. Another talked about training for a marathon. They asked about my job, my wedding plans, genuinely interested. Nobody compared me to anyone. The conversation flowed easily. I realized I'd been so isolated by family drama for years that I'd forgotten what normal friendships felt like. These people knew me as I was now, not as the backup daughter. When I left, I had 3 new phone numbers, plans for brunch. I texted Vivian, thanking her. Glad you came, she replied. My friends really liked you. Such a simple thing, but it made me feel like I was building a real life, separate from my family history. Monday morning, a delivery person showed up at my office with a huge bouquet of flowers. My coworkers gathered around as I read the card. It said, "She forgives me," in my mother's handwriting. I stared at it, then actually laughed out loud. The manipulation was so obvious it was almost funny. She forgives me, as if I was the one who did something wrong, as if she was the bigger person. My coworker asked if everything was okay. These flowers, I said, are from someone who doesn't understand that forgiveness works both ways. I looked up nursing homes near my office, found one 2 blocks away. During my lunch break, I walked the bouquet over and donated it to their activities coordinator. She was thrilled. The residents will love having fresh flowers. I didn't text my mother, didn't call, didn't send a thank you card. The silence was my answer, and it felt powerful. That evening, Luis asked if my mother had sent anything else. I told him about the flowers. He shook his head. She still doesn't get it. I think she finally does get it, I corrected. She just doesn't want to accept it. There's a difference between not understanding and not wanting to change. And my mother falls into the second category. 2 weeks later, Luis's mom called, asking us to dinner. His whole family was there. His mother pulled me aside. Would it be okay, she asked, if we officially introduced you as our future daughter-in-law at the family reunion? They wanted everyone to know how happy they were I was joining the family. That invitation, it made me emotional. It was the family acceptance I'd always wanted but never had. Yes, I told her, thanking her. 3 weeks later, at the reunion, Luis's extended family welcomed me with genuine warmth. His grandmother hugged me, heard wonderful things. His cousins asked about the wedding, wanted to see pictures. One of his aunts pulled me aside. I can see how happy you make Luis. That's all that matters to his family. Nobody asked invasive questions about my own family. They accepted me because Luis loved me and because I was kind to him. That was enough for them. I spent the afternoon talking, laughing, feeling like I was finally part of a family that actually wanted me there. Your family is amazing, I told Luis on the drive home. They think you're amazing, too, he said. For the first time, I was part of a family that chose me. One afternoon, sitting at my desk, I realized something. I hadn't checked my phone anxiously for messages from my mother or Vanessa in days. The constant vigilance, the bracing for impact, it had faded without me even noticing. I used to wake up, grab my phone, steel myself for whatever manipulation or guilt trip awaited. Now, I checked my messages when I felt like it. I didn't panic when I saw notifications. That evening in therapy, I mentioned it to Dr. Miller. She smiled. "This is what peace feels like," she said. "Pay attention to how different your life is without their toxicity." She asked me to describe it. It felt like breathing easier, like not having a knot in my stomach all the time, like being able to enjoy good things without waiting for someone to ruin them. "You've done the hard work of setting boundaries," she said, "and now you're experiencing the reward of that work." She reminded me peace didn't mean nothing bad would ever happen again. It just meant I wasn't living in constant crisis mode. I drove home, grateful for how far I'd come, how much lighter my life felt. 2 weeks later, Fern called again. Dinner at my place. Just me, Dominic, and a few other family members who supported you. She'd been thinking, she said, about starting a new tradition for the people in our family who actually cared about healthy relationships. "I'd love to come," I told her. The dinner was on a Saturday night. Regina was there. 2 other cousins I hadn't seen in years. Everyone hugged me, told me how proud they were. We ate lasagna and garlic bread. Nobody mentioned my mother or Vanessa, unless it was to support the boundaries I'd set. Fern raised her glass. "Let's make this a quarterly thing. Just us. The family members who believe in treating each other with respect." Everyone agreed. I felt like I'd found something I didn't know I needed. This is what family dinners should feel like. Relaxed, full of actual laughter, instead of tension and comparisons. Luis and I celebrated our 1-year anniversary of dating 3 days later. He took me to the same restaurant where we had our first date, ordered the same food. Over dessert, he said, "You've changed so much in the past few months. Watching you stand up for yourself at the engagement dinner, it made me love you even more. I saw how strong you really are." I was terrified that setting boundaries would push people away, I admitted. But instead, it just made room for better relationships. He reached across the table, held my hand. "That's exactly what happened. Protecting yourself didn't cost you love. It just cleared out the fake love to make space for the real thing." He was right, and I was so grateful he'd been beside me through all of it. A week later, a message on Facebook from a cousin I barely knew, Sarah. She lived 3 states away. We'd only met a handful of times at big family events. She'd heard about my mother through the grapevine and wanted to reach out. She was dealing with something similar, her brother the favorite, her feeling invisible. "Any advice?" she asked. I wrote back, telling her about therapy, setting boundaries, learning you can't make someone value you if they're determined not to. We messaged for an hour. By the end, she thanked me for being honest about how hard it was, turning my painful experience into something that could help someone else felt meaningful in a way I didn't expect. I screenshotted part of our conversation, showed it to Dr. Miller. "This is part of your healing, too," she said, smiling. A few days later, my father called again. He looked nervous. He'd started therapy himself, he said. My boundary letter, it had made him realize some things. He'd spent decades enabling my mother's behavior, pretending it wasn't that bad. He admitted he should have protected me. I appreciated him taking responsibility, even though it was too late to change the past. He asked if we could keep our monthly coffee meetings. "Yes," I said, "as long as you respect my boundaries about not discussing my mother." He agreed. 2 weeks later, Vanessa sent an email to my work address. "Final message," the subject line read. I almost deleted it. Curiosity got the better of me. She'd accepted I didn't want a relationship, she wrote. She wouldn't contact me anymore. She hoped I'd be happy she was moving on. No actual apology. Just vague words. I read it twice. Deleted it. I didn't know her closure. Her happiness wasn't my responsibility. The fact that she still couldn't apologize for her actual actions told me everything I needed to know about whether she'd really changed. Luis and I spent an entire Sunday afternoon working on our wedding guest list. The final count, 42 people. His entire family, my father, Fern and Dominic, Regina, a few other supportive cousins are close friends. I even added Dr. Miller. This list, Luis said, looking at it, represents something important. These were people we chose or who chose us, not people we invited out of obligation. The list felt right. I didn't feel guilty about who was missing. I started writing my wedding vows the next week. I wanted them to be personal, honest. A line about building a family based on respect and genuine love. Choosing each other every day. Creating something better than what we came from. I read them to Luis during our rehearsal dinner practice. Tears in his eyes. His parents hugged me. His mom said she was honored to be part of my new family story. His father said they'd always wanted a daughter. The acceptance from his family still caught me off guard sometimes. It was so different. 3 weeks before the wedding, Luis's mom called, sounding upset. My mother had sent a letter to their house, asking them to convince me to invite her. Pages, apparently, about how hurt she was, how she was my mother and deserved to be there. Luis's mom read me a few lines. The manipulation was blatant. We decided she'd write back, saying it wasn't her place to interfere. She supported my boundaries. I was grateful his family protected my choices without me even having to ask. Regina called a few days later. I'll be on mother duty the day of the wedding, she offered. She'd keep an eye out, handle the situation if my mother tried to show up uninvited. Luis and I decided to hire security for the venue, just in case. They dealt with uninvited guests at weddings more often than people think. Knowing I was protected let me actually look forward to my wedding day instead of dreading it. The week before the wedding, I woke up feeling genuinely happy, excited, not anxious. I wasn't bracing myself for something to go wrong. In therapy that afternoon, Dr. Miller pointed out, this is what it looks like when you're not constantly preparing for criticism or disappointment. You've done the hard work of removing toxic people from your life, and now you get to experience what peace actually feels like. I was marrying someone who loved me exactly as I am, surrounded by people who celebrated me. I didn't have to perform or prove my worth. The relief of that realization made me emotional in the best possible way. Fern's house smelled like vanilla and flowers for the bridal shower. The living room was packed with women who showed up for me, not out of obligation, but because they actually wanted to celebrate. Regina hugged me at the door, whispered she helped Fern plan everything. Tears started. Luis's mom and aunts were there, chatting with Vivian. My cousin Sarah, even Dr. Miller. Nobody here had ever made me feel like I wasn't enough. The shower started with everyone sharing a story about me. I braced myself for backhanded compliments. But Regina went first, talking about how I stood up to a bully in middle school, how it showed her I had more courage than most adults. Vivian told everyone how I helped her through her parents' divorce. Luis's aunt mentioned how Luis lit up every time he talked about me. Each story revealed qualities I didn't know other people noticed, strengths my mother never acknowledged. By the time we got to the gift opening, I was crying happy tears. Luis's mom stood up. She pulled out a delicate silver bracelet with tiny charms. It belonged to her own mother, she explained, voice shaking a little. She'd been waiting for the right person to give it to, someone who would appreciate not just the jewelry, but what it represented. She fastened it around my wrist. It's yours, something borrowed, she said. But really, it's about welcoming you into our family officially. I lost it. This is what it felt like to be chosen, to be valued, to receive love without waiting for the criticism that always followed it in my original family. 2 days before the wedding, my phone rang. My father. My stomach tightened automatically. Got a minute? He asked. I stepped onto the balcony. He was calling to confirm he was still walking me down the aisle. Then his voice got quieter. I know I can't make up for all the years I stood by while your mother tore you down, he said, but I want to be part of your future if you'll let me. Watching me set boundaries had made him realize how much damage he allowed by staying silent. Yes, I told him, you can walk me down the aisle. Our relationship would never be what it could have been, but I appreciated his effort to do better now. He thanked me, his voice cracking. After we hung up, I sat on the balcony, thinking about forgiveness and second chances. I wasn't ready to forget everything, but I was willing to let him try. The morning of the wedding, I woke up calm. Luis was already at his parents' house. Regina and Vivian arrived with coffee and bagels. They helped me shower, did my hair. The whole process felt easy fun. We laughed about Regina's disastrous date, Vivian's new puppy. No underlying tension. No competition. When it was time to put on my dress, they helped with the tiny buttons. Looking in the mirror, I felt beautiful, without needing anyone to tell me I was. The dress fit perfectly. The bracelet from Luis's mother caught the light. Regina took a million photos. Vivian got emotional. This is what getting ready for your wedding should feel like. We were just 3 women celebrating a happy moment. It felt completely right. The ceremony venue was exactly what we wanted. A small garden, flowers everywhere. Chairs for our 42 guests. I waited in the back room with my father. He adjusted his tie nervously. When it was time, he offered his arm, and we stepped out into the sunlight. Luis was standing at the front. The second he saw me, tears started running down his face. My father walked slowly, trying to make the moment last. Halfway down the aisle, he leaned over and whispered, "I'm proud of you." For once, I believed a family member's compliment without analyzing it, without waiting for the other shoe to drop. When we reached the front, my father hugged me before handing me off to Luis. He was crying too. The ceremony itself was simple, perfect. Luis's vows shook with emotion. He promised to always see my worth, even when I struggled to see it myself. To be my family when my original family failed me. To spend every day proving I deserved to be loved exactly as I am. Half the guests were crying. I managed my own vows about building something better together. When the officiant pronounced us married, Luis kissed me and everyone applauded. The reception was in the same garden, under string lights that made everything glow. We ate, talked, danced. Dominic stood up to give a toast. He talked about how the strongest families are the ones we choose, not just the ones we're born into. How watching me set boundaries had inspired others. This room full of people who actually love her, he said, is more like family than any holiday gathering ever was. Several people nodded in agreement. When Luis and I danced to our first song, I realized I wasn't thinking about who was missing. I wasn't scanning for my mother or Vanessa, wondering if they'd show up to ruin things. I was fully present with the people who did show up, the ones who proved their love through actions. My mother's absence didn't diminish the joy. If anything, it protected it. At the end of the night, Luis's parents found us by the cake table. His mother said she didn't just gain a daughter-in-law today. I gained a daughter, she said, and the distinction mattered more than I could explain. His father said they were proud to call me family. I thanked them for accepting me so completely. I was building a new family story where I was valued, celebrated. My mother's narrative about me being the backup daughter had no power here. On our honeymoon in Hawaii, Luis and I talked about the future, what kind of parents we wanted to be. He wanted our kids to feel equally loved, equally supported. I agreed immediately. No comparing siblings. No playing favorites. We'd celebrate each child's unique strengths. Our children would never wonder which one was loved more. We would break the cycle. Turning my pain into a promise to do better felt like the ultimate victory over my mother's legacy. Transforming all that hurt into something protective, healing for the next generation. Somewhere during the honeymoon, it clicked. I'd stopped defining myself in relation to Vanessa or my mother. I wasn't the backup daughter anymore. I was just myself, and that was enough. The voice in my head that used to sound like my mother's criticism had gotten quieter, replaced by my own, telling me I was worthy. Luis was sleeping beside me one morning, and I thought about the life we were building. Setting boundaries hurt. It cost me relationships. But it also freed me to become someone I actually liked. 3 months after the wedding, I was at a coffee shop when my phone rang. My father's number. "I need to talk," he said, his voice quieter than usual. He'd moved into a hotel. He'd separated from my mother. The words hung in the air. He explained that watching me build a life without her toxicity made him realize how much her behavior affected his own happiness. He sounded tired but relieved, like he'd been carrying something heavy for years and finally set it down. I told him I wouldn't pressure him about his long-term decisions, but I was glad he was taking care of himself. We talked for 20 more minutes, just normal conversation. When we hung up, I realized this is what happens when you stop accepting cruelty as normal. Other people start to notice it, too. The following week, at my therapy appointment, Dr. Miller suggested we move to monthly sessions. I had built such a strong foundation of self-worth. She reminded me healing wasn't a straight line. I'd still have hard days, but my mother's voice in my head didn't control me anymore. I could hear criticism without believing I deserved it. I could set boundaries without drowning in guilt. I could accept love without waiting for the conditions. I left her office, walking to my car, proud of how far I'd come from the woman who used to apologize for existing. November arrived. Luis and I hosted our first holiday dinner in our apartment. His parents, my father, Aunt Fern, Uncle Dominic, Regina, Vivian, Grant. I cooked. Luis set the table. The apartment filled with genuine laughter. No comparisons. No hidden insults. Fern brought a pie, hugged me. "So happy to see you thriving." My father talked golf with Luis's dad. Grant told a funny story. Vivian helped me. We ate, talked, played a game. The whole evening felt warm, safe. This is what family is supposed to feel like. People who show up because they want to. People who celebrate you. I looked around the table at faces that chose to be there. I finally had what I always wanted. A year passed since that engagement dinner. I woke up next to Luis in our apartment and thought about how different my life looked now. A husband who loves me without conditions. In-laws who treat me like their actual daughter. A chosen family of relatives and friends who celebrate my wins, support me. But most importantly, I had my own approval. I didn't need my mother to validate my worth anymore. Her opinion used to define everything. Now, it was just noise I didn't have to listen to. The freedom that comes from that realization, it was worth every uncomfortable conversation, every boundary I had to set, every relationship I had to let go of to protect my peace. I wasn't the backup daughter anymore. I was just me, and that was enough. So, if you've ever felt like the backup in your own family or had to walk away from toxic relationships to find your peace, I want to hear your story. What was the turning point for you? Let me know in the comments below.